Hello everybody, Keith here again. Today I'm going to repot 4 Cymbidiums. Two of them are going to be the last two of the Mavanine jesters that haven't been done. I did one a little while back, which I don't think I filmed. They've been in these media since the 19th of October 2020, so 18 months or thereabouts. They've done okay, but they've not done fantastic. We did look at these, the 3 Mavanine Jester plants as part of the development orchids in the last 12 months, and this, if you like, is rounding out the experiment, because one I had in a big pot in bark. That's been done because the pot was obviously too big for it, but otherwise that was fine. This one is in the Westland mix, which is small bark and ceramis. And the thing about this is it has seemed to have done the best of them. A little bit more moisture, I suspect, but it still hasn't done phenomenally well. So I'd like to, depending whether I put it in bark or this, or put the others in bark, or what I do, is partly going to depend on what this one looks like underneath, which is why I'm doing it first. So I'll have a look at this one, take it out of the pot, see what kind of a mess it's in, and we'll go from there. So, right, first things first, let's have a look what's in here. Well, we've got roots. That's one thing. Dare say some of them aren't very clever. It's kind of what we expected, but what I didn't do when I initially potted them was take the moss plug that had been grown in out of the middle, and I think that was probably a mistake that I'm going to be paying for now. It's possibly why they haven't done as well. But having said that, most of these roots don't look too bad. There are some that are going to want looking at, but on the whole, the roots don't look bad at all. So I think what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to take the second Mavanine out of its pot. So you can see on here we've got some duff roots. Most of them I think are reasonable. We'll get away with those. I think that pseudo bulb doesn't look great, but it is firm, it's not rotting. So we've got 2 new growths, a small pseudo bulb there. This is quite a good strong growth. This will be growing again before long. But none of my Cymbidiums did very well last year, and I think that's because they didn't get fed well enough. So I'm going to put that back in there for now, so I know which one is which. And I'll go and get the second Mavanine Jester. This one's going to need another pot. Repotted on the same day, 19th of October 2020. But this one is in the same size pot, but it's in bark. Now here we've got a distinct difference. We've got a big pseudo bulb, the older pseudo bulb, and we've got 2 smaller new growths. So this has behaved differently from that. So this has been slower, presumably because it's been a bit drier. So what does that mean? Again, let's have a look inside. Well, these roots are not as good. I don't think these roots are as good at all. So that's interesting. They're reasonably solid, but they're not great. They're nothing like as good as the roots on that one over there. Now, I'm really surprised by that. This really hasn't done as well. So considering that probably explains why the pseudobulbs haven't grown as well. So that's interesting. So it does look as if the Cymbidiums weren't getting as much moisture as they wanted, and I'm pretty sure they weren't getting the food that they wanted. I mean, we have had some root growth from that big pseudobulb under there, but this is fascinating. There are very few orchids that I would now use Westland with, because it retains such a lot of moisture. But very clearly here we've got two plants which have done differently. This has put better pseudobulbs up, new pseudobulbs up, whereas this one's been a bit slower, but the rootstock's nowhere near as good. So I think that points me more towards using Westland with it. Now that's obviously going to want another pot because it's broke. But I'm going to need to trim these up, and nobody's going to be bothered about that, so I want to turn that off for now. Okay, ready to start trimming these. My snips are in bleach. That's what some of the senior people in the East Midlands Orchid Society recommend, and they're people who've had far more success for far longer than I've had. So after that was introduced at one of the last meetings, I thought that was a good idea to copy. So let's take the bottom of that one off, and it can go off all the way back up there. I don't often get too precious about sterilising things. I think it can be a bit overdone, but I think when you've got a number of plants to do, it's probably worth taking the time. Yeah, these roots really are not great. I'm absolutely astonished by this. I must admit, there's some that aren't bad, but a lot of them are really not good at all. Now, whether that's because they are dead, or they've got too dry, or what, I'm really not sure. But we've got a lot of roots here which are really poor. We'll have to be quite ruthless, I think, with these. No point leaving roots on that are not very clever. I think that will do with that one. put them back in the same size pot that they've been in. I think that is going to be plenty. They've not grown that much. But yeah, last year I put them out, as I always put my Cymbidiums and plunges outside, and I've always had problems because you get the dear old British summers where you get quite a lot of rain, so I couldn't really let them dry out or even come close to drying out before looking to before you re-water them, because I think even these, although they like their moisture, don't want to sit in it. So actually they're not as good as I thought they were. So I thought, well, I want to give them as much chance to grow as I can. So what I did was put some pelleted fertiliser in with the compost, and I thought, well, the rain will dissolve that, and it'll help feed the orchids. No, it's not an ideal fertiliser, but I thought that the rainwater would dissolve it and you'd get enough that the plants would get some feed even when it was really too wet to start pouring orchid feed through them. And I think that was a total failure. It simply didn't work. So that's not an experiment I shall be repeating this year. They will get fed as best I can. We'll get lots of rainwater, I'm sure. But otherwise, they are just going to be treated as I've done them before when the plants have done better. So as I say, we'll see how we go now. These new growths, that one's just putting out some new roots, and that's a good. I think I've picked on a good time to be repotting these two. So neither of them's got fantastic roots, but the better roots were definitely in this wetland compost. So I'm going to put both of them back into that. Try and get them a bit lower down in the pot so that the roots don't get exposed as much, because I think that was another issue. So I think potting these is going to be the same as potting anything else, with a thickish root. So I don't think you need to see that. So I'll just show you the end result at the end when I've done this. Right, this is the one that was in bark and was sat quite high. This has now been placed so that the bulbs are just resting more at the top of everywhere, and I hope that that will now kick off. I've made a note that this was the small one in bark before, but it's going to be very interesting to see where this one goes in the next 12 months. So now I'll do the other one. Right, this is the other Mavenine jester, the one that's always been in Westland compost. Gone back in again. All the moss has been taken out as it has with the other one. It's been put in so that the bulbs are just about at the top of the compost. And that's it. I think that'll be fine. Hopefully that'll just kick on. I'm going to have to be perhaps a bit more cautious with the watering of these. Make sure I get my finger down and make sure it's more dry than perhaps it usually has been, but nevertheless it's in some fresh bark, and it should be fine. It had the better roots, so we'll experiment. We'll see if the one that's been in bark ends up with better roots next time. I suppose I'm prone to experimentation because that was my job. I was a research engineer for about 10 years one way and another, and worked in labs an awful lot before that in engineering. So you can take the engineer from the lab, but you can't take the lab out of the engineer. So yet another experiment, and we'll see where we go with this one. But those are the two Cymbidium Mavenine jesters. Right then, this is the first of the other two smaller Cymbidiums I've got. I bought these two, or the next two, from Burnham's a good few years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, and they've grown slowly and steadily. Now they're not doing, and the roots again don't look very good on the older side of the plant. So I'm going to, again, I don't know how long it's been in this pot, probably longer. You can see here, look, all that pelleted stuff, which is not done a blind bit of good. So let's have this one out as well. Now this one has been in orchid focus bark, which is what I tend to use as standard with my plants. The roots are not great. I'm not sure what's happening here, but whether the bark is just bad, I don't know. There are some half decent roots, but there's an awful lot, as I say, on this back end that are not very clever at all. I'm not going to be able to get these out by hand. I'm going to have to get them under the tap and give them a rinse just to try and loosen this stuff better. So I'm going to turn the video off and go and get this thing ready, and then we'll start looking at the roots. Right, it looks as if I've got to go in from the back side of the plant to get to the roots to clean it up, but a lot of the roots on this side of the plant are not good. But we have got some nice white firm roots, so that would appear to be the indicator of health with a Cymbidium root. If it's brown, it's probably dead. If it's green, or it's the normal thing, if you squeeze it and it's flabby, then all the velamin's gone, and that part of the root's no good to you. We have got some working roots. But not a lot from the back side of this plant. But I think we're starting to get now to mostly to roots that are in decent nick. It seems to me that a lot of the time you get the main root will do better than side branches. Whether that means side branches get knocked or something, I honestly don't know, but it seems to me that there's something weaker about a branched root, and it's less, perhaps it's just simply less robust or something like that, but I think that's not far off done. This one, the two are quite unusual crosses. It's this one is called Bartolome Farello, and it's the particular type is silver, and it's white with red on the lip. Well, I'd love to see it, but it hasn't thought about flowering yet, so we'll see how we do. But now most of the roots that are left are okay, I think. We've got a new root there, look, coming off this new bulb, so new growth. So I think that can go back. Whether it needs a pot as big as that, I don't know. I mean, that's the next size pot down, and no, that'll be too big. So it wants to go. It can go back in where it's come from. Yeah, it wants that size pot. Again, it needs to be lower down. I think that's the critical thing. It needs to be lower down. I don't think I've got enough Westland to put this one in it. And the roots on this one haven't done too badly in an orchid focused bark. So that's what I'm going to use on this one. And we'll get some of that round. I'm going to take that off. See that sort of rubbish on it. Can't yank too hard sometimes, otherwise the risk is you'll just take off stuff that you don't want to take off. So I think up to a point I'll just leave some of that be, but yeah, that can go in there. Bartolome Farello, and let's see what the last one is. This has done quite a lot better. We've got 3 new growths, so we should have plenty of new roots. This one is one called Parnasse, which is described as, just says pink, minimum 10 degrees centigrade. So this is real. This is backed in here. There we go. Oh my word. Now then, that is sodden at the base. So that's been in here too long. There's nothing like enough ventilation in that pot. So I'm going to put that in there to soak. That's just rainwater. I'll give it there to soak in the hope it'll start releasing some of that bark. And I'm going to go and take this this pot, fire up my soldering iron, and I'll give this a lot more to a lot more air holes, because I don't think I've got any more pots of a similar size as air comes. Don't think that'll be big enough. I don't think that will be big enough. I think that might be a bit too shallow. No. So we'll keep that one out when we're ready, but this needs a lot more ventilation. So hang on a minute, I'll be back after I've banged this full of holes. Right, I've greatly increased the number of holes in the base. That was 1, 2, 3, 4. I've put extra holes in there, a ring of holes in there. I put these slots in when I potted this in some while ago now, but I've put 3 holes above each one of those, so there's a fair amount more ventilation in that pot than there was. So now I'm back round to trying to get rid of this old bark, and that's not going to be an easy job or a 5-minute job. So I think under the circumstances I'm just going to knock this off, get on with this, and I'll come back a bit later on. Well, unfortunately that was probably the most brutal depotting I've ever had the misfortune to do. You saw how it came out. Well, it was absolutely solid, and some of the bark had just turned to complete mush at the bottom. So when I started trying to furcle my way through that, the roots dropped to bits, and I ended up just hacking loads of it off, which is very, very unfortunate. I'm just praying that these 3 new growths that it's pushing up, and the fact that the pseudo bulbs don't look too bad, that we'll get some decent new roots down into this new compost that it's going to be put into. Yes, that's now miles too big. That's no good at all. So it's going into this air cone pot, and we'll just see how it goes. Right, so now it's just a straightforward repot. I suspect this one's going to need staking. So I'll knock off, do the repotting, and then we'll just round off. Right, job done. That's the better one, that's Bartolome Ferrello. Potted up again like I've done the Mavenine Jesters. I've tried to get it slightly further down in the pot, or the box slightly higher if you like, so that the bulbs are just resting on the top. This is the other one. Doesn't look as clever, you've got, but we've got 3 new growths on it, so it's got some strength, and hopefully those roots will soon start shooting down into that bark. So this is going to have to be watered quite sparingly, but I think it's going to be a great deal better than it was. And one thing I have done, and which I do on all my orchids now, is date of the repot on the back of a tag in the plant, so that I know exactly how long it's been in there. This is suffering. Alright, it's down to me, I'm not saying it's anybody else's fault, but that's one of the reasons why, because this might have been in this pot, I don't know, at least 2 years, if not longer, and given the fact that the bark had got a lot of fines in the bottom, which had turned to almost like dust and sludge, and it was stopping it draining very well. I think that's that's a warning to all of us. So that's the end of this lot. Thank you for watching. I hope that's been instructive. If it hasn't been interesting, learn by other people's mistake, people, please. But that's for Cymbidiums. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon. Bye.